I think we're recording. Yeah. All right, guys. That looks good.
Does that also record your volume or your sound?
Let's make sure. So input, MacBook microphone. Check. Cool. All right. Cool, guys. So yeah, we're talking about APIs today. Who can tell me what they think an API is in relationship to what we're doing in the internet? What's up, Sufi?
Maybe requesting information from open source or something like that?
Requesting information from open source. We are requesting information. It doesn't necessarily have to be open source. Like there's private APIs, and then there's public APIs. So private APIs you usually have to pay for or at least apply to get like an API key. And public APIs are usually open. So an API stands for an application programming interface. And what that means is that you can get information, you're interfacing with somebody's application to get information back. Does anybody know like the idea of like how the internet actually works? What exactly happens when we go to like youtube.com? Like how are we getting all this stuff on the screen? HTTP, okay. Can you elaborate a little bit?
So there's like HTTP code that they're serving you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a server, and every person who accesses youtube.com gets sent the code, and then on your browser you construct it, and then it will organize the layout of the page in a way that is using the HTML that's sent to you.
That was sent to us. Very good. So essentially what we're doing is we're requesting, and look, this is the stuff that I look at. So we got my rainy jazz, bossa nova. Why you're not going to be a programmer. Oh, wow. Atlantis Mysteries, evidence revealed. Yeah, I don't want that one either. So.
Technically is the best one.
All right. So what happens when we go to YouTube is we're essentially sending out a request to a URL, which is youtube.com, and then we're getting a response back. What he said about status codes is it's a code that gets back sent to us in our header, and we don't have to get into what all status codes mean now, just know that they exist. Anything that's in the 200 range means that it's okay. A 300 is some sort of redirect. A 400 error is a client-side error. That means you guys messed up and requested something bad. And a 500 code is a server-side error, which is we got something bad from the server. So we could actually look at that if we use our Google Chrome Inspector tool here, and we bring this over to the side, and then we go to network, and then we just refresh the page. We could see all the requests, all the things that we got back from the server, and here are the statuses. Okay, but this is the page YouTube. So we sent a request, and it was a GET request to youtube.com. The status code was 200. They said, hey, cool, everything's okay. And this is the response header. This is not what we got per se that we're displaying, but this is the header that just gives us some information about the page. We have like a cookie that's set there. We have, where is it? The type of the content that we're getting back, text or HTML, the way that it's encoded in UTF-8. So we get all this cool information back. And then we get the actual contents of the page. If we look at the response, this is what we get back. We got back an HTML file, essentially. And that HTML file had a bunch of links to other things, like images and whatnot, and it's all this other stuff that loaded up over here. So every time you see an image or anything like that, or a script, it's going to be loaded up over here. So it's going to be another request to the server for us to get back all this stuff. So this is all the stuff that gets loaded from this one particular page. So why do we care about this? Because we want to use it. So YouTube is not really a great example where we could just grab stuff because it's just a request and response. But there's certain websites that give us some information too. So if we go to like reddit.com, so we're on Reddit. Let me make this a little bigger for you guys too. You will see that we've got all this stuff on the page, but if we go to another URL, /.json, okay, it's going to give us something back that looks like this. Can anybody tell me what this is? What does it look like at least?
The data that was requested from the API.
Nested hashes.
looks like a hash, looks like a nested hash. And it is the data that was requested from the API, but while this isn't called an API, it essentially is. We're getting information back. This is the front page of Reddit. All right, we're just getting it back as a hash. Without images, just links to the images or the text about the stuff that's on there. So you can see it's got a bunch of stuff in here. And can we get like image ur.com. I guess it doesn't give us an image URL. Images, okay, here they are. Images, source, and then we get the URLs for the images. So we can actually parse this hash and get eventually to this right here, which is going to be an image that's probably on the front page of Reddit right now. If we click on it, 403 forbidden. Well, that's not good. So they might have something blocking us from taking, nice. Nice. It's the dangerous thing about going on Reddit during class. So we're getting back essentially what looks like a nested hash. Now an API essentially just gives us all this information that we can use into our program, into our CLI application. There's different tools that exist out there for that. And Reddit.json is just one of them. We could also go to like api.github.com/users, and then you get like a list of all the GitHub users pretty much in order, and then this paginates, so it like ends at 46 it looks like, but there's thousands of GitHub users that we can get the information about. And look at this, the funny thing is it gives it to us in order. So do you guys know who Mojumbo is? No? Okay, that's the co-founder of GitHub. And that's his GitHub username. And it's, of course he would have ID number 1 because he was one of the first accounts that was created on GitHub. What's up?
He's false in
Site admin is false, yeah. Maybe he didn't want to deal with that crap anymore. So we could actually go to users Mojumbo and get like more information just about him in JSON. So we can get like his subscription URLs, what organizations he belongs to, the URLs of his repos. So we get a bunch of information in JSON form that we could then do stuff with, should we want to. Today, what we're gonna do is we're gonna play with the Google API, Google Books API, to get some books and display like a list of books that we wanna read or whatever we wanna do with books. Burn them. Just kidding. All right, so let me see. I got notes for the Google. Where's the Google thing here? Google Books. All right, so can you guys read the URL up there? So this is the API for the Google Books. Anything after the question mark is a query, and what we do is after this Q equals, these over here, R plus query is what we want to search for. So if we wanted to search for like books on Ruby programming, Ruby plus programming. Okay, we're gonna get a list of books on Ruby programming. If you guys go to these URLs yourself, you might see that it doesn't look like this. It's gonna look like a mess of just strings. That's because I have an extension on my Chrome called JSON View or something like that. It's somewhere around here. JSON Viewer, yeah. So if you guys see even worse than this, let me turn the extension off. Actually, let me go incognito. New incognito window. So yeah, and it actually still looks pretty good. Usually it's just a jumbled mess of just text. Because essentially that's all it needs to be. It doesn't have to have any spaces. Like the computer knows how to parse this JSON itself. So if we wanted to do this from our CLI application, we're gonna need some sort of tool. All right, and what we're gonna use today is gonna be called it's gonna be a gem that we're gonna install called RestClient. RestClient, this isn't the only client that we can use to get HTTP data. There's a bunch of other ones out there. RestClient is just the one that I want to use today. There's another one called HTTP Party, which, by the way, is super popular. It has 77 million or billion downloads, more than RestClient. I think it's just because it's called HTTP Party. People think it's fun. So let's read a little bit about that gem. REST client. Okay, so REST client, GitHub, here it is. And we could read about it from the Ruby gems too. Like this is in the Ruby gems repository. Do we all know what a gem is by now? I think so, right? It's just a little chunk of code that somebody else wrote for you that we can reuse by just importing it into our file. So here's REST client, and right here it says a simple HTTP and REST client for Ruby, inspired by the Sinatra micro framework, style of specifying actions get, put, post, delete. A lot of mumbo jumbo. Essentially, it allows us to make requests to a website using a GET request, which is the most standard one, which is just we're asking for stuff. Put request allows us to change stuff. Post is to create, and delete is exactly what it sounds like. It's to delete stuff. All right, right now, today, we only care about GET requests. In the future, we'll care about put, post, and delete when we get into Sinatra and Rails in Mod 2. But right now, just GET request is all we need. And if we go to the GitHub page, okay, we're gonna get, why does it keep shrinking? We're gonna get a bunch of information on how to use this gem. So it's a simple HTTP and REST level blah is what we just read. Okay, and then any good Ruby gem is gonna have pretty decent documentation. So here's some things that we have. It requires Ruby greater than 2, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the usage. This is what we care about. So we need to require REST client, and then, so easy. We just do REST client.get a URL, and then headers if we want to pass in our own extra headers, or post if we want to like send some information to change something on the server. So this is really what we need right here. Require REST client.get. We're going to copy that, and back to our trusty terminal over here. We're going to go to our desktop, and from here we're going to create a file. Touch googlebooks.rb, code googlebooks.rb. All right, so now that we grab that, we're just popping this in. This looks pretty dark. Do you guys want me to change the color on this, or like maybe make my screen brighter? Does that help? It's the same.
Yeah, this is good.
It's good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this second part here, the headers, this is optional, okay? But we can even just do this from IRB if we wanted to. So if we bring up our console down here, we can just test it without even running any of this code up here. Let me clear this. We can do IRB, require REST client. And if you don't have this installed, it's first got to be installed in your system. So you would do gem install REST-client. Cannot load such file. Okay, well, exit. Gem install. I guess I didn't have it installed. So now we're back in IRB and require REST client. Cool, so that's true. That means we're ready to use our REST client. Any questions on this so far? How are we feeling about this? All right, it's all just very high level stuff so far. So now let's actually get down into some of these things. So this is saying REST client.url. This is usually a string, so it could be like http google.com. Or actually, that's totally typed out wrong. Okay, so let's just copy this and let's see if it gives us some data back. Okay, we got REST client response 200, and then some more stuff that we just didn't read. How come we can't do anything with this? What just happens? We didn't save this anywhere. We didn't say like response equals REST client.get http www.google.com. Okay, now we've got the response. All right, and we could do different things with this. If we see what the response is, if we want to do response.class, it's a REST client response. If we want to see the methods on this, you can do methods. It'll show you all the methods that we have for this response. And it looks awful, but there's a bunch of stuff that we can do in here. Let's say we wanted to see the headers that came with this. Where are you, headers? Usually this is formatted prettier in my computer, but I guess today I just didn't like it. Unicode normalized. Does anyone see anything about headers in here?
Can you do command check?
No. Response dot. Okay, cool. So response to headers by itself just gives us the actual header that we got sent back. All right, and it should look fairly similar to the same one that we saw in the browser a little while ago. All right. So this isn't what we want. What we want to do is we want to get some JSON information from the Google Books API, like we saw. Where was it? Let's get that Google Books again. Let's come back over here. So we want to be able to get some information about books. All right, so query here would be like, let's find out about Ruby programming, right? And now it's going to give us a bunch of books about Ruby programming. So let's use this URL now instead of this crazy URL that we have here. So we're going to set the URL equal to with Ruby programming in here. So now we're just going to do that right there, passing the URL to the REST client, and then we're going to save the response. And now we're going to start running it from, instead of doing things in the command line here, we're actually going to run our code and see what happens. Okay? So response REST client dot get URL. So response equals, I'm sorry. So from here we could do Ruby Google Books. Oh, I'm not in desktop. Ruby Gooby. All right, and now we should have the last line is response equals REST client dot get URL. So this is going to be the return value right here. Okay. You know what? Let's also require pry. And let's throw a binding pry in here. So we could stop the execution and we can see what happens. So I'm going to run it. Cool. So now we are in this pry, and then we've got this response equals REST client, so we can inspect that response. Okay. And again, status code 200, and then we've got all these methods, and now it's going to print out pretty for us because I'm in pry. If we do methods, we can see all the methods that we have on here. History, cookies, and code, shell, blah, 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 blah. Okay? If we want to get the data for this, we're going to have to parse this information. Now, Ruby comes with a gem or an internal library called JSON already. So if we do require JSON, we don't have to install it. It comes with Ruby. But it's going to allow us to view that response. If we do response again, do we have like text? No. Dot JSON. Tampoco. That means no, we don't have that either. But if we wanted to view that response, we're going to have to parse it with some sort of parser, because all that is a big ass. It's just a humongous string, okay? And we're going to need to parse that string to actually turn into a hash. Remember, all we're getting is just a big string, and then you're going to have a bunch of stuff inside of it, like the little curly braces, keys, values, it's called JSON. It's a type of, it's like HTML. It's a type of data that is used in the internet to like communicate with APIs. So we have to turn that data into something that Ruby can use. In our case, it's a hash. So we're requiring JSON. And if we look at the documentation for JSON 2, we'll see how to use it. Ruby JSON. So it's a module that comes with the Ruby language itself. Okay, and then you can say my hash equals JSON.parse, and then you just give it some data here. All right, so let's go back into this guy. And then we're going to say my response hash equals JSON.parse, and we're going to pass in response. All right, let's run this again and see what happens. So now let's do my response hash. Now we've got all that data back from Google Books, the same as we were looking at on the browser a few minutes ago. So you can see it's a pretty big object. There's a lot of books that come back for Ruby programming. So what's like a good thing that we might want to get back? Like, we don't want all this information, right? This is just a big list of books. What do we want?
Titles. Categories.
Titles, okay.
Genre or something.
Genre, okay. What else can we get that might be useful to us? Description.
Average rating.
Average rating, is that in there? Yeah.
Right there.
Cool. Maybe authors, who wrote the book.
Categories.
Maturity rating, yeah. Obviously, this was not mature. Those are the ones we're going for. As immature as possible. Okay, cool. So, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we can get out of here, that, as you guys saw. But this is a big hash. Like, we don't know how to really get this information. It's so big. Like, where do we even start? An easy thing to do is to just do my response hash dot keys. It's going to give us the top level keys for this hash that we just got back. So my response hash keys. So we have kind, total items, and items. Okay. So let's inspect all these keys and see what this gives us. So kind. What is that first? It tells us it's books and volumes, whatever that means. So it doesn't really give us much back. The next one is total items. And that just tells us how many total items came back. So there's 1,696 books that came back with Ruby programming somehow in either the title or description or however they figure that out. Then the other one is, what was the other one? Items. So items is probably what we want then. Okay, and yeah, it looks like it's an array, as you guys can see right here. It's got a little opening bracket. Okay, and if we go to the end of this, how do I get to the end? There's a way to page down. No, pattern not found. There's a way to like page down to the end of this. Anyway, let's just queue. All the way at the end, there was going to be a closing array bracket for it. So if we check out what this was and we want to say class, it's an array. So that hash has an array of books inside of it with a bunch of information about each book. Okay? So now we know how to get the array of books, right? So array of books equals, and Jimmy. I'm not going to ask you. You're falling asleep. How do we get an array of books here? From what we just saw up here.
So you just look for the key, which is the title, but you're just doing each individual book as an.
I want to get the array of all the books. So how did we just get an array of books a minute ago in the command line? Anybody else can answer too.
My response hash items.
My response hash, just items. Items.class is just going to tell us that it's an array.
Okay.
Cool. So now we have an array of books. Now we can iterate through these books, right? So what can we do to just print out all the titles of all the books? Is that gonna work?
Well, just check the.
Let's find out.
Check the keys, I guess, for the.
Check the keys for the books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You can check that.
we could do how we just did this right here.
And then dot, keys.
No, we want to do that first, right? So it'll give us the first one, and then dot keys to see what each individual book is going to, all the keys, all the top level keys that each individual book is going to have. So we've got a kind, ID, e tag, self link, volume info, all this crazy stuff. I don't know. What do you guys think it's going to be? Kind? Anybody else?
Sale
Well, searching for volume info, one of those two.
Volume info or sales info? Oh, let's inspect them. Or search info. All right, first, search info.
On top, right?
Oh yeah, sorry. A tutorial. Okay, that gives us some sort of description. So how about we do now sale info. Okay, it tells us, yeah, you cannot buy this book. So volume info, I think volume info probably sounds like what it's gonna be. Cool, yeah, so volume info has a title, subtitle, authors, published date, description. All right, so we said put books.title, but we know that this is supposed to be volume info. And then we need the title from that. Okay, so now when we run this again, before we reach this pry, we should get a bunch of titles. Let's make this a little prettier though, so we can separate the titles. So we're gonna do puts equals times 70. All right, and this is gonna give us 70 little equal signs to separate our code. So we're gonna exit, we're gonna reload this, and bam, look at that. We've got, is that all we got? I thought it was 1700 something or another. All right, so that's what we got. Cool, so now we know how to get the volume info in the title. Do we want to put more stuff in here? Do we want to make this prettier somehow maybe? So like, we could do like title, right, plus book. What else do we want before? We wanted the authors. Puts. If we look back at what we had a minute ago and then we looked at the authors, what does it look like it is here? It's an array. Cool. So if we had multiple authors, how would we put that in here if it's an array? That's one way of doing it. There's an easier way. If we just want to list the authors out, authors, so we could do book, yeah, split. I'm sorry, join. Volume, info, authors, and then we want to dot split. Okay, and when we split them, let's separate them by a little pipe. So in case there's more than one author, they'll just be next to each other with a bunch of these little symbols right here. Okay?
It's join.
It's joined.
It's joined?
already in a row.
Ah,
Split is.
thank you, yes.
Wait, from words to it.
Yeah.
Cool. So, let's do this one more time. Okay, so track back, Google Books, undefined method join for nil class. We do get a bunch of these though. We've got authors, David Thomas. Wait, isn't that the Wendy's guy?
Dave Thomas.
Dave Thomas, yeah. He wrote a book on Ruby programming. Must be, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So it gives us a few back, but then we run into this error, undefined method join for nil class. What do we think that is? What's happening there?
There's no author
There's no author. Now,
for that specific book.
that doesn't necessarily, so yeah, there's no author, but it's saying for nil class. So what that's really saying is that there's no key authors. Okay? If I have a hash,
Oh, so that one doesn't have the key.
yeah.
Okay. That's because that one might not work.
Oh shoot, I gotta do this in Ruby. I'm trying to do it in Bash. Let's go in here. Oh, I can type great. So if we had like a hello, B, goodbye, whatever, right? And I don't want to save that. Actually. And I do C, A, we're gonna get hello. If I do C, B, we're gonna get, but if I do C, C, or any other symbol that doesn't exist, we're gonna get a nil class, or any other key that doesn't exist, we're gonna get nil. Okay, so if I did the same thing with out of respect for Tony, poop. Okay, still nil class. So what that meant when we saw that nil was that there was no author's key at all. And if we go back into our Google APIs, which one was that where we got stuck? The Ultimate Guide to Ruby Programming. Let's do Command F, the Ultimate Guide to Ruby Programming. So yeah, we see that there is no author key. Okay, and that's what we got a nil value. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions so far? How would you get around that? It's a great question. Conditional. So what do we want to do? Can somebody help me out?
And just do unless at the end of it, unless authors goes like false.
If at the end of your thing,
What do we want to do?
like on line 15 at the end,
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
book, the key
Value,
column,
all the way to
column.
This is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Is this good?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right? Because if it's nil, then this is never going to execute. If something's in there, something exists, then this will execute. So that should help us avoid that problem now. This screen is so tiny when I got to blow it up like this for you guys. All right, exit and cool. So what do we got now? Do we have an error somewhere?
This is binding prime.
Is that what that is? Cool. All right.
There we go.
Yeah, so no errors this time. Cool. And there it is, the Ultimate Guide to Ruby Programming. Unbelievable. Book with no author. Don't want to wrench into our plans here. All right, and that seems to be like the only one. And I'm actually glad we had that problem because now you see what we need to do to deal with it. And from here, we can create even more stuff. We can, add a description if we wanted to. or whatever we want to do. So that's pretty much like the big idea of getting stuff from an API. Other things that we might be able to do, and instead of just always doing this Ruby programming, is do a book to search equals gets. Okay, and now we're gonna wait for some input. I'm gonna say puts. What book would you like to search for? Okay, and now the program will pause here. It'll give us the book, and then we can interpolate that book inside of this URL query parameter here instead of just always having it be Ruby programming. All right, now we're having a little bit of fun. Now we could actually like get stuff that we want instead of like some hard-coded junk, you know? So now, how would we put our search term in here?
Hash and brackets.
Cool, so we're gonna interpolate the, yeah, and we're just gonna pop that bad boy right in there. And now we could actually search for any book we want. So, what kind of,
spaces?
huh?
Does it work with spaces? Or do you
Can we do like this?
Yeah, it'll interpolate the spaces for you in the URL, and it'll turn them to like %20 or whatever it's got to do to make sure it's readable. Yep. And that's going to be the same for every REST client that you have out there, from Node to Ruby to whatever. Usually you can just pass in the string and it'll know how to put the line breaks in there for you. You don't have to concern about like taking care of the spaces. If you did,
just take it like as like a query.
What's up?
In Google, that
Yeah.
Generally speaking, they should just take it as a query, even if it's not plus or whatever. That plus is in between. It's just the %20 is in between.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And the reason, again, it knows that it's a query is because after this question mark, this is the URL query parameters here saying Q equals. You might have other ones. This is just what Google expects. But there might be things like, I don't know, and %author equals, and then some other parameters here. And it could have a bunch of other URL parameters that we can put in there in the query string. Just so you guys know, right now what we're doing is just one search term, but in the future you could have a URL with, I don't know, 30 different search terms for different things in there, like maybe different genres or things like that. All right, so now let's run this bad boy again. What book would you like to search for? Anybody?
Tale of Two Cities.
Tale of Two Cities. Okay, so we got a Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens. Cool, Jeffrey Karnicki. All right, so we got a bunch of information back. So now we're asking for the data back ourselves, and we're able to display it or do whatever we want with it. We could even save it to a database if we're using Active Record and store it as our own data, or like a user's favorite if you want to select it. You can say user.favorite book and then use it in there. And I hope that starts giving you some ideas of what you can do with APIs and this particular Ruby gem called RestClient. Any questions so far on any of this? What's that?
If you did want to save the user input and add it to a database,
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have to have Active Records set up here, but essentially the way that you would do anything else, like let's say you just want to get like the first book instead of the array of books each, then you would do like user.update book, and then you would do array of, and let's say this is just for an update. You could do when you create it to array of books dot first. Okay, and then this would update your user. If he has a book property or a book model that's in there, then that's how we would save it as an object. You could create books instead of creating users like this. So for every book that you get back, if you want to save them to your database, down here you could just do book.create, and let's say you only wanted a couple of the things from here, like the title and the author, and you had those attributes in your model, then you would do like title, and the title would be book volume info title, this right here. Okay, and now you would create a new book in your database with the title that we got back from whatever the search was. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can do here. And this is just very, like the minimum that we can do, what I'm showing you guys right now, but you guys can get very creative with this and do whatever you want, essentially. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You want a better example, or was that good enough?
No, I think
Cool. All right. What's up?
Quick question, is there a way to do it directly in the migration, just to populate into SQL directly, as opposed to doing it via like Ruby? I'm just curious if there's a method to do that.
You could do it like if you create a rake task that just runs beforehand. So you could do like rake rake colon C database with from API do, and then you essentially just write this in here, but then put a create. That right there, and then just create in that rake task, then it'll run that rake task. Or if you want to even throw it in your seed file and like have the seed file run this, when you do rake db seed, just make sure you have something along these lines for you like get the information first, and then you just create whatever you want, doing something like this, but instead of puts, you would do the create. So it'll be essentially the same thing, you just add it to your seeds file, and then you do rake db seed. Cool? Other questions? All right, so this looks pretty good, but it works okay, right? It just looks really, really crappy because it's all like in just one big file. How can we maybe break this up into like methods that we can use and have this code be a little more reusable and a little less blah? Can we make methods for some of these things instead of just
Root classes.
Hmm?
Root classes.
We can create a class too. Usually when I want to refactor something, I start with what's the smallest thing that I can do, and then just work from that. And we could even work from top to bottom. So we have something like, what book would you like to search for? Book to search for .get. So we can do a method for search term, right? And then just wrap that in there. Or get book search term, right? Cool. We could have another method here for maybe get books. So all this would be in get books. Def get books. It's going to return an array of books. All right, we could move all this in. So now we have this books to search here. Okay, so we should probably pass in some sort of argument, or maybe find books instead of get books. And we could call it the same thing, books, book to search. Okay, so now when we call find books, we're gonna have to pass in a book to search. This let's call start, so we know when we start the program that's what we want to run. Bad name too. What do you guys think would be a good name for this? Hmm?
Like prompt user.
Prompt user, yeah. Or get user input.
Prompt user search.
Yeah. Prompt user search. All right, we don't gotta like overdo it with the details, but just you want to make this as clear as possible to whoever's doing this. And then finally, we want to just def print results or print books. Okay, there's a lot more things that we can do here. Like once we have like the books, we can just say, oh, get a title of a specific book from each search term, or get authors. We can create a bunch of different methods here for all these books. And this is just, like I said, this is just a very quick way of just starting to organize this, and then we can get more detailed into like doing very specific things with all these methods. Anybody have any questions on this so far? Okay, so what did we cover today? Shoot.
One API is.
APIs. Awesome. What else did we cover?
JSON, or requiring different gems.
Requiring different gems. What were some of the gems we required? RestClient. JSON. Pry, but we always require pry. Cool. What else?
Parsing data from the API.
Parsing the data from the API.
Just like how you use that.
Yep. Which is real important. Remember, parsing is just turning a big old string into a object that whatever language you're using can understand. In our case, Ruby understands hashes, so it turns a big old string into a hash. If it was JavaScript, it would turn a big old string into a JavaScript object. Just to give you guys an idea. So parsing is something that you're going to see everywhere. You got to parse certain data to turn certain types into other types of data.
Question.
What's up?
The line 7, book to search, is in the scope of get user input. How it can it be in other method if it's
So when we call down here, when we're running this now, we're going to have to say def. So I'm sorry, not def. User input equals get user input. Okay, so this is the user input. Then we're going to call the next method, which is find books, book to search. So now we're going to find books with what? User input. Okay, and then print books. Oh, print books needs an array of books too. So it's a good thing we finish this up. So now we could say array or just books. Books equals that. And then we would do print books, and then we would pass in books, which is just the array of books.
We cannot pass directly the method as a
You
parameter,
can.
right?
Mhm.
So in that case, we would be just find books.
Yeah, it just gets messy doing that. You can definitely do that. But again, it's just, that looks scary, right?
Go even deeper.
But you can do that. You want to go deeper?
Yeah, just to get a user input in there, why not? Syntactic vinegar.
Syntactic vinegar, yes. So we don't like this, all right? I think this is a little friendlier. All right, and Ruby's all about making friends. All right, cool. Any other questions? All right, guys. Well, that's it for today. We learned some really cool stuff. I hope you guys make good use of it. And give me a nice round of applause at the end of the class. Thank you. It's my favorite part. It's the reason I do it.